Superman is my favorite superhero of all time. That's it. That's the statement. For anyone who wants to cry about it in the comments and school me on how Batman is much cooler or how Marvel is the superior universe, please be advised that I don't give a Superman is the superhero. I don't give a shit what anybody says. He is the supreme leader, the ultimate icon in every possible metric. He makes every other superhero in existence his bitch, and nobody can say anything about it. All right, cool. Now that we've established the basics, let's talk about the damn thing. I saw Superman 2025 in theaters a couple times, actually, and I have a lot of thoughts. Now, to be completely transparent, while Superman is my favorite superhero of all time, I do have to admit that I have a complicated relationship with Superman in live-action adaptations. Yeah, that's right. I'm gonna be that bitch in this video. Surprise, surprise. I'm a nerd and I like comic books, so I have opinions about this shit. Now, don't get me wrong. I said I had a complicated relationship with live-action Superman. I didn't say I'm a hater of live-action Superman. I actually quite like a number of them. Some of them I even love.
Absolutely nobody. Christopher Reeve's Superman is my guy, as he has been for so many people on this planet. That is the first Superman I ever encountered before I even set eyes on a comic book. He is the Superman I grew up with, and he was just incredible. This was my entire childhood, okay? This movie is the reason why I am a nerd. I was mesmerized by it, and all of that is thanks to Christopher Reeve's portrayal of the character. Everything about his performance was just lethal. He completely embodied both Clark Kent and Superman because, yes, he plays them like two different characters. He changes the way he carries himself, the tone of his voice, the sense of confidence when he becomes Superman. It was great. This movie is everything. It overwhelmed me with a sense of wonder and joy, and it forever turned me into a comic book-obsessed piece of shit. The 1978 Superman was a historic hit. This movie made $300 million at the box office in 1978. I don't know if you realize how much money that is. Adjusted for inflation, that is a box office run of $1.5 billion in today's money.
$1.5 billion. This movie was easily holding its own against the Avengers movies, the Harry Potter movies, Star Wars, you name it. This thing was a titan that took the world by surprise, actually. Because in the 70s, the idea of making a film adaptation of a comic book character, let alone a superhero, was an idea that everyone found completely stupid. People did not believe in this movie when it was being made. Nobody was rooting for Superman. Christopher Reeve talked really openly about how people were telling him he was throwing his career in the garbage by doing this project. They truly believed this was the worst decision an actor could make. Really, I cannot stress how everyone in the industry was being a hater towards the Superman project. And then it came out, and everybody shut the hell up. I wish I could have been alive to witness the phenomenon the 1978 Superman became in pop culture. This thing had everybody in a chokehold, so much so that we are still talking about it 50 years later. But guys, I'm a millennial. I was born in 1994. I was at my prime childhood years in the 2000s.
You know what that means. Oh yeah, I grew up watching Smallville. Now, Smallville might be cheating a little bit because Tom Welling says all the time that he doesn't like when people say he played Superman. He considers he played Clark Kent because Smallville is the story of Clark Kent in the years leading up to him becoming Superman. But let's be very real here. After a certain point, Smallville just became a Superman show without the suit. That's right. I said it. Who's going to do anything about it? Huh? Who's gonna do anything? Bro was fighting Brainiac, General Zod, and Doomsday and assembling the Justice League before becoming Superman? Get the fuck out of here. After season 4, this was a Superman show. And I will say, I liked Tom Welling as Clark Kent. I liked Smallville in all its cheesiness and its 2000s camp. I mean, admittedly, the show kind of lost me in the second half there, but
Superman was never political or pro-immigration or anti-racism. That is such a new concept for liberal propaganda. Never seen before back in the old days. And above anything else, Smallville also gave us the greatest Lex Luthor of all time. Because yes, 25 years later, I genuinely still believe Michael Rosenbaum's take on Lex will never be beaten. He's just too good. And I also grew up with two great Lois Lanes. Margot Kidder was the blueprint for decades, and Erica Durance really made that role her own, and she nailed it. Honestly, the 2000s was a great era to be a Superman fanboy. And then this movie showed up. Look, I will never blame Brandon Routh for Superman Returns. He really gave it his all. He really tried. He was so incredibly dedicated to this role. A few years ago, he went on Michael Rosenbaum's podcast and talked very openly and earnestly about how he lived the failure of Superman Returns and the cancellation of its sequel.
This experience really fucked him up. He had such a hard time processing and accepting the whole disaster, and he held a lot of anger over it for a really, really long time. Apparently, from what I understand, the cancellation of the sequel was a very long and painful process that just broke him. But there was just no viable way to continue the franchise after the reception of the first movie. I really don't like Superman Returns for no other reason than the fact that it's just not a good Superman story. I understand what it was going for, but I just think the execution was all wrong. And sure, in terms of pure entertainment, everyone will tell you Superman Returns' biggest flaw is the fact that this is a Superman movie where Superman doesn't fight anything. But I don't even think it's that crazy. Superman 1978 is a movie where Superman doesn't really fight anything either. He catches a few bad guys here and there, but he doesn't get a real fight scene until the sequel, when the Kryptonians arrive. Superman Returns isn't necessarily boring because he doesn't fight anyone. It's boring because it's just a bad story.
At the very least, those silver linings, Brandon Routh got to play Superman again in the CW, which he talked about how healing that was for him after the heartbreak of his previous experience, and good for him. Okay, let's talk about the big guys. So Henry Cavill's Superman, or as I tend to call him, Snyderverse Superman. A topic I have somehow managed to avoid on this channel for all 4 years of its existence. And now I am compromising my peace. Here's the thing. I think Henry Cavill was perfect in this role. And I mean perfect. But the issue is that while Henry Cavill was perfect to play Superman, his Superman sucked. Yeah, that's right. I said it. I said it. Okay, I'm sorry. Actually, no, fuck that. I'm not. It's just the truth. And the Snyder cult doesn't like it when you say that.
They disagree with every atom in their being. They think Snyderverse Superman is the ultimate version of the character. The greatest Superman ever. But I'm sorry, it's not actually because it's a good Superman. The reason why the Snyder cult is so obsessed with this Superman is the same reason why the Snyder cult is obsessed with Zack Snyder movies. And that is because this Superman had mad aura. Henry Cavill in this role is just too fucking cool. And that's because, well, Henry Cavill, but also because that's kind of Zack Snyder's ultimate talent. Zack Snyder is really good at aura farming. He can make just about anything look incredibly fucking badass for no reason. He just has an eye for epic shots, and that's what his fans like. I think Zack Snyder fanboys are people who ultimately don't care about the story of the movies they watch. They don't care about the plot. They don't really care about the characters.
They certainly do not give a shit about the logic of what they're watching. No. People who love Zack Snyder are people who think a movie is a masterpiece if it looks cool. Visually, I mean. Ooh, the visuals are cool, therefore, it's a good movie. And if you're one of those people, yeah, I can't disagree here. Like him or not, you have to recognize that when it comes to visuals, it's very hard to beat Zack Snyder. This man has an aesthetic that is very much his own. He has a real talent to figure out what looks good. Even his worst movies have impeccable aesthetics. And he knows he has this talent because so many of his movies have big montage scenes where he just gets to put on a song he likes and exhibit a series of incredible shots he thought of.
That's kind of a staple of his filmography, which makes sense because, if you don't know, Zack Snyder pretty much started his career as a music video director. When it comes to visuals, he knows his shit. But here's my hot take. While Zack Snyder is an incredible visual creator, he's just not a good storyteller. I'm sorry. That's the big issue.
Zack Snyder cannot tell a story to save his life. And you can just tell because in recent years, as he's been given more and more creative control over scripts and story ideas, his movies have devolved into absolute nonsense. Anyone who has attempted to sit through Rebel Moon could tell you that. Don't even get me started on the director's cut. Again, he knows he's good at creating epic shots, and you can tell he's passionate about it. He talks extensively about treating his shots like paintings, and that's why he loves using slow motion. But that is also his flaw, because he doesn't value storytelling over that. He's the type of director who is ready to completely abandon the logic of his story or the logic of his characters because he has an idea for a cool shot. Like Superman hovering over this flooded city and just watching people in distress as they raise their hands for help. Why are you standing there? Help them. And I say all of that, but please know, I like some of the Zack Snyder films.
I think even his biggest haters will agree that 300 fucking slaps. This movie is dope as hell. It has no right to be as good as it is. I think his Watchmen is perfectly fine, not without issues. I don't love Man of Steel, but I like it for some of its ideas. I also like its take on General Zod. Batman v Superman is incredibly flawed because of wonky storytelling choices, bad character writing, and just an overall bad plot with flat characters. But I do enjoy the Ultimate Edition somewhat, and this movie did give us one of the greatest Batman scenes of all time. The Snyder cut of Justice League is actually really solid. It's too long and has a lot of unnecessary shit like what are you doing here? But this movie has some really cool elements that made me happy to see. And yes, this is one of the best Flash scenes of all time, every media included. So I'm not going to sit here and say Zack Snyder films don't have any merit.
That would be very disingenuous of me. But I also just can't pass up the fact that he's just not a good storyteller. He's more concerned with things looking badass than things being faithful to the source material, consistent, and unfortunately, I do believe his take on Superman is the greatest offender of this habit of his. But then there's the Superman that came after Henry Cavill. No, not this one. This one. Tyler Hoechlin's Superman is, I believe, the most comic book accurate live-action Superman to date, which is an insane thing to say because everybody who watches this channel knows how I feel about CW shows. But guys, I promise you, Superman and Lois has one of the greatest live-action Supermen of all time. Tyler Hoechlin fucking bodied this role. It's ridiculous how good he is, and I think he served as a perfect transition point for the Superman we ended up getting in 2025. Okay, I've made you wait long enough.
Let's talk about it. I think Superman 2025 is really good. Not great, but really good. To be completely honest, in the months leading up to its release, I started to feel a little nervous about this movie. I kind of struggled with it. There was a lot of marketing. Warner Brothers pushed the shit out of this movie. Even my grandparents knew it was coming out. And my grandparents are all dead. There was just so much out there, and I watched the trailers, and the trailers made me feel weird. I couldn't help but get the sense that a little too much was going on. I started to get worried about the insane amount of characters who were being shown. And I truly started to wonder if this movie was going to try to do too much too soon. The simplest way I have to describe it is I just found the trailers very overwhelming. And given the current climate in Hollywood, that made me scratch my head because this movie is coming out at a very particular time in pop culture. A time where superhero movies have lost quite a bit of popularity. It's been pretty rough in the last few years, and a lot of people are talking more and more about the infamous superhero fatigue, the prophecy that foresees the end of the genre at the hand of corporate greed.
Well, if there's any debate to be had over it, Superman 2025 is the proof that superhero fatigue is not a thing. Audiences aren't tired of comic book movies. Audiences are tired of bad movies. And unfortunately, the last few years haven't been all that glorious for the genre. Between the DCEU crashing and burning with flop after flop after flop until they finally decided to pull the plug and start again. The Sony villain universe being a masterclass on how to put the lowest amount of effort in your project. And the MCU quite literally losing the plot by trying to triple the number of yearly releases only for the sake of prioritizing quantity over quality, making the last two phases of the franchise a largely forgettable series of slop projects with a few good ones here and there.
And leading to their first series of 1823 box office bombs and a generally negative reception to most of their entries. Needless to say, it's been quite an embarrassing few years for superhero media. It was very easy for me to be skeptical about Superman. But my only silver lining, my only saving grace, the only thing that kept me in check, is the fact that this movie was being directed by James Gunn. And James Gunn has never given me a reason to doubt him. So I waited for D-Day, and I finally sat down in a theater on opening night. And after years of wait, Superman finally began. And I felt weird. I felt really weird. And I got very worried. Because when the movie started, like for the first 20-ish minutes, there was a thought that kept popping into my head again and again. I kept thinking, this doesn't feel like a Superman movie. It feels like I was thrown in the middle of a season of a Superman show. The movie begins and you get a quick text on screen that says, yo, metahumans have been around for 300 years and Superman has been around for 3 years. He just lost the fight for the first time. Enjoy the movie.
And then you just thrown in the middle of it, and the movie throws so much at you so fast, it felt a bit disorienting. Like for the first little chunk of the movie, I was having a difficult time getting invested in what was going on. In general, I do believe it's an issue with the movie as a whole. I think Superman 2025 is trying to do a little too much for its own good. The movie feels very bloated. Not outright messy. I wouldn't necessarily say that the movie is convoluted because everything that's happening is very simple to follow, but I do think the movie is a bit overcrowded, both when it comes to characters and when it comes to plot. There's just a little bit too much going on, and the movie never really gets a chance to breathe. But things do slow down a little after those first 20 minutes, and that's when I started to really get into the film. And I felt an immense sense of relief over that. I felt like I could finally focus on getting to know this new Superman, played by David Cornsweth. And I gotta say, the guy's just got it.
I fucking love this Superman. I love him so much. He is great. Not good, great. He's fantastic. I enjoyed every second of him on screen. I think the reason I like Tyler Hoechlin's Superman so much, and David Cornsweth's Superman, is because they bring back a very simple concept from the comics that has always been crucial to this character to me, and that had been lost in recent years with the Snyderverse. It brings back the concept that Superman is just kind of a chill guy. He's a nice dude, very kind-hearted, benevolent, laid-back guy who just enjoys life. That character-defining trait had completely vanished lately, with the Snyderverse giving us a very depressed Superman who hardly ever showed emotion, and that annoyed me. Superman is supposed to be this pleasant, charming, agreeable guy who's just trying to do good. There's a reason why everyone calls him a Boy Scout.
He is kind, at times, to a fault. And I am so surprised that there are people who fucking cannot stand this new Superman because of that. Like, to me, the giveaway is this. People who are annoyed at the sequence in Superman 2025 where Superman is fighting a monster that is destroying Metropolis, but he takes the time to save a squirrel. If that scene annoys you, I don't think you get this character. That's the most Superman thing ever. People always make jokes about Superman using his godlike powers to save a cat out of a tree, which he does for real in the 1978 film. Because that's just who he is. That's the essence of his character. For him, there's no difference between a squirrel, an alien baby, or a human being. All of their lives are just as meaningful to him, and he shows the same kindness and care to all of them, no questions asked. And I think that's where David Cornswith absolutely nails this role. His Superman is everything I've ever wanted in an adaptation straight from the comics. He's 22-31, charming, he's likable, he's joyful. He seems like a guy who could be friends with just about anybody, and that is such an important trait of this character. One that we had lost with the Snyderverse era, unfortunately. I strongly believe that Zack Snyder had no real interest in Clark Kent. I mean, we hardly ever saw Henry Cavill be Clark Kent, and when he was just being the same deadpan guy as when he's Superman, somehow with even less emotion. Zack Snyder was interested in Superman's powers because they're cool, and he can make cool shit with it, but the character, I don't think he gave much of a shit. And the issue that I have with Snyderverse fans is that they have come to believe that Superman should be like Henry Cavill's Superman, that this is what the character is. They want a Superman that acts like Batman.
They want him to be dark and broody and fucking miserable all the time. But the Snyderverse Superman, as much as I love Henry Cavill in the role, is just not Superman. And he is even less Clark Kent. Henry Cavill's Clark Kent is the most empty representation of the character we've ever had, which sucks because I think if he had been written correctly, Henry would have killed this. And listen, it's not to say that Superman in the comics doesn't have dark moments, especially in Elseworld stories. Please refer to Injustice Superman. That motherfucker was scary. For anyone who doesn't know, the Injustice Saga is an Elseworld storyline where Superman is tricked by the Joker and he accidentally kills Lois Lane, who is pregnant with their child. A horrifying act the Joker tricked him into doing to distract him while he bombed Metropolis. After that, Superman snaps, he murders the Joker in cold blood, and then makes the choice to override all of his morals, and he becomes a dictator, proclaiming himself the ultimate authority on Earth,
essentially turning the entire world into his kingdom, so that he can protect humanity at all costs, even if it means robbing them of all of their liberties. Naturally, Batman doesn't like that at all, and he begins a crusade to take down Superman's regime, which starts a world war of gods that sees all of the heroes and villains of the DC universe picking sides between Batman and Superman. It's a very sinister story. So yes, the comics have explored scenarios of Superman being dark and going evil, yada yada. But there's a reason why those are Elseworld stories, alternate universe versions of the character, because everyone is aware that's not the Superman. The whole thing with Superman is that, yes, he's a god, but a god with the personality of a golden retriever. He's a sweetheart who likes people and has a lot of compassion for them.
He's an empath, and you wouldn't know that from most of his adaptations, but Superman is also funny because he might be a god that saves people and fights the most powerful beings in the universe. He just doesn't take himself very seriously. See, I've lived in Metropolis most of my life, and I can't figure out how some yokel from Smallville is suddenly getting every hot story in town. Well, Lois, the truth is, I'm actually Superman in disguise, and I only pretend to be a journalist in order to hear about disasters as they happen and then squeeze you out of the byline. You're a sick man, Kent. You asked. One of my favorite moments ever with the live-action Superman is from the very first episode of the CW's Superman series, where Superman saves a kid from being crushed by a car. After saving him, there is a very small interaction in the scene that just made my heart melt. That is the most Superman thing of all time. This, to me, is who Superman was always supposed to be. A god, but a golden retriever and a mama's boy.
Snyder vs. Superman could have never had a scene like this. Snyder vs. Superman was a god who acted like a god. He was cold, distant. I don't think we ever see him smile. We hardly ever see him saving people's lives. Aside from one montage in BVS and that scene where he snaps Zod's neck, we just don't really see him saving people. We don't really see him being a superhero. We see him punch things a whole lot, and he kills a lot of people. That guy is fucking dead. You never at any point saw him have any pleasant interaction. Aside from that one scene with Lois Lane, he's not a man of the people. You never see him interacting with people. He lets people worship him like a god. Are you kidding me? Clark Kent, little Kansas boy, would never let people worship him like a god. And again, that's not a Henry Cavill problem. Everybody knows Henry Cavill can play charming and pleasant Superman-like.
He just never got the script to do so, because the people handling the Snyderverse fucking hated Superman and clearly did not understand him. There's a reason why they refused to greenlight the sequel to Man of Steel for an entire decade. Anyways, I'm not going to elaborate more on that now because it would take too much time, and because, spoiler alert, I've been working on a whole video about the downfall of the DCEU for a few months now, so I will address way more of this at the appropriate time. The bottom line here is, I think Snyderverse fans don't care to have an accurate Superman. They don't care to have a well-written Superman, a well-written Clark Kent. I don't think they even care about Clark Kent. Snyderverse fans just want a Superman that has aura. Everything else be damned, he just needs to be a Chad. He just needs to look cool. And because Henry Cavill embodied that perfectly, they will always think that any version of Superman that is lighter, kinder, more comic accurate is lesser than the Cavill man. But I disagree.
This new Superman is the guy. That's the Superman that made me dream as a kid. There's a warmth to him, this inviting sense of humanity to him. He feels like Superman straight out of the comics. I think this movie is also James Gunn realizing that with his plan for a long-term DCEU, this is a new Superman that a generation of children is going to grow up with, and he really respects that reality. And that's when I realized that this movie is built to almost be like an episode of a Saturday morning cartoon. It's not this deconstruction of the character-defining Superman story with universal stakes. No, you're just kind of following Superman on one of his adventures because you're going to get to many more of them. And I think I really like that. This movie feels like a chapter in a comic book. That's sort of where I understood where he was going with this. This movie is meant to introduce the universe. I think Gunn and the other filmmakers who will work on the DCEU will eventually start to move towards a larger story, probably leading to a Justice League or Justice Society movie. But this is just kind of an introduction chapter, and I think we needed that. Some things with stakes that don't feel super dire, and that is just lighter. He wanted this movie to be fun, bright, non-heavy, and easy to watch. And he succeeded at doing that. Superman 2025 is the definition of a crowd pleaser. Sometimes it is to a fault. There are a couple of scenes where it feels like the movie refuses to sit in its own emotional weight. There are a few moments where the movie tackles something emotional, and just as I am starting to get into it, the scene is interrupted by a joke to break the tension. And sure, it works in terms of the banter because thankfully the rest of the cast is also pretty friggin' awesome. Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane is one of the best casting choices in recent memory. I legit cannot think of anyone who could fit that character more. She's so good as Lois, it's ridiculous. She's charming, smart, funny, and personality-wise, Rachel's take on Lois Lane makes me think of the animated series Lois a lot. And that's probably my favorite version of the character. Really, she's somewhere between animated Lois and Margot Kidder Lois. And that is a great Lois to have. She is very active in this story, and I love how often the movie acknowledges that she's a very normal person in a world where a lot of not normal shit happens all the time. You get scenes where she interacts with other heroes, and the way it plays out kind of shows you that to a normal person, superheroes are shitty weird. And Rachel Brosnahan is so good at sarcasm that bringing that to her Lois just makes the interaction she has so funny. By the way, if you haven't seen The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, do yourself a favor, go watch that. And I love the way this movie portrays the relationship between Lois and Clark. It tackles it in a way we've never really seen before. Because when this movie picks up, Lois and Clark have only been dating for about 3 months. And Lois is not entirely sure this relationship is right for her. She's thinking about breaking up with Clark. And Clark can kind of feel it coming and he doesn't really know what to do. So throughout the movie, their relationship is kind of up in the air and their dynamic just never gets old. All of their scenes together where they just get to talk are fucking awesome. They have the perfect chemistry for Lois and Clark. Nicholas Hoult is a great Lex Luthor. I love his take on the character. Granted, his Lex is a tiny bit underwritten, but he's also designed to feel like a cartoon villain. And he succeeds at that. I think the movie does a great job at showing that Lex is intelligent and incredibly dangerous,
But he's also a petty man-child who does all this shit only out of jealousy. His hatred for Superman is simply due to the fact that Superman is everything he wishes he was, and he finds it unfair. If you really think about it, this entire movie is about Lex throwing a temper tantrum, and I think that's fucking hilarious. Granted, his evil plans in this movie don't make a lot of sense. The whole thing with the reveal of Ultron Man being a clone of Superman that he can control was hilarious to me because I couldn't help but think, dude, if you really wanted people to hate Superman so much, why go through all the trouble you went through of finding his secret fortress in Antarctica and all the other shit you did? Why didn't you just dress your Superman clone as Superman and send him in the streets of Metropolis to do
Horrifying things in Superman's name. You basically have Homelander on speed dial. You could have done this at any time, my guy. Oh, and by the way, the Justice Gang was also fucking great. Obviously, Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner was just brilliant. Keith was hilarious, and he embodies the arrogance of that character so well. He is such a dick in this movie. Hawkgirl, while terribly underused and underwritten, was a more fun presence than I expected. She has a very funny scene in the third act, and I am excited to see her again, hopefully a bit more fleshed out in the future. But I don't think anyone who has seen the movie will be surprised when I say the MVP of the gang is without a doubt Mr. Terrific. A character for who I admittedly had zero expectations, but damn me, he was so cool. My favorite part of this experience is halfway through the movie when I suddenly realized that the actor playing him played the bad guy in Twilight, and that
Made me laugh out loud at a moment where nothing funny was happening, so some people in theaters probably think I'm unwell. Mr. Terrific was great, absolute show stealer, and he has one action scene that is very Guardians of the Galaxy coded. That was very fun to watch, and this is while I never thought I would be coming out of a Superman movie, desperate to see more of Mr. Terrific. Oh, and I'll be honest, when it was revealed that Krypto the Superdog was going to be in this movie, I was a bit worried, admittedly. And while I do think that Krypto took a lot of space in the movie, maybe a little too much towards the third act, I also think he's adorable and hilarious, and I'm very happy that he was in this movie. And now that I know he's Kara's dog, I know what they're going to do next. There is a reason they wanted you to be attached to that dog, and it relates to one of the greatest Supergirl stories ever written. That is the basis of the Supergirl movie coming out next year. That is all I'm going to say. So yes, despite being bloated, the movie just remains fun and lighthearted and hopeful and just very entertaining. And I think people needed that, and it shows. People showed up for this movie, and the response to it has just been very wholesome. Superman 2025 has now become the highest-grossing Superman film of all time at the domestic box office, and that in only 3 weeks.
Yes, first Cultist, it surpassed Man of Steel. Here's its issue, and I'm happy. I'm glad that this DCU is starting on such a high note. The movie wasn't perfect at all, but it was really good. And honestly, after the last few years of comic book movie flops, that's all I could have asked for. I hope that this universe continues to be handled with care, that stories come first, and that James Gunn remains focused on only green-lighting movies when they are certain to have a great script. So yeah, is Superman 2025 the beginning of a new legacy for the character? Well, you know what? I think it might just be.